The scent of pine and petrichor hung thick in the air, a stark contrast to the ice in Luna's veins. Under the cold, judging eye of the full moon, the entire Silver Fang pack was gathered in the clearing. At its center, Alpha Kyle stood, his powerful frame etched in silver light, his expression one of cold, resolute finality. Beside him, draped over his arm like a trophy, was Selene, a beta's daughter with eyes like a satisfied cat. Luna stood before them, her spine straight, her chin held high, though her heart was shattering into a million irreparable pieces inside her ribcage. For 3 years, she had loved Kyle, not just as her alpha, but as her destined mate. The mate bond had snapped into place for her on her 18th birthday, a golden, radiant thread of pure feeling she had cherished. She had waited patiently, tending to the pack's wounded, mending clothes, offering quiet counsel, believing he felt it too, but was waiting for the right moment to claim her. This was the moment, but it was not a claiming. Luna. Kyle's voice, usually a deep rumble that warmed her, was now a judicial gavel. The moon goddess gifts us mates for strength. A strong alpha needs a strong Luna, one who can lead alongside him, not just tend to the sick and the weak. The pack murmured. Luna felt their stares like physical barbs. She was an Omega, the lowest rank. Her strength was in her hands, her heart, her healing, not in battle prowess or political cunning. I have found my true partner in Selene. Her lineage is strong. Her wolf is fierce. She is what Silver Fang needs to ascend. Therefore, I, Alpha Kyle, reject you, Luna, as my mate. A collective sharp inhale swept through the pack. Rejecting a true mate was a profound taboo, an affront to the moon goddess herself. It was known to bring a slow, withering sickness to the rejected one, a fading of the spirit. The act itself was a scar on the pack's soul. Luna closed her eyes for a second, feeling the golden thread inside her fray, its light dimming under the assault of his words. The pain was immediate and acute, a searing hollowing out of her very essence. She had imagined the scene 100 times in her darkest fears, and every time she had crumbled, begged, screamed. But standing here, the reality was different. The pain was there, yes, a tsunami of agony, but with it came a chilling clarity. This man, who she had loved with the totality of her soul, saw her worth as less than nothing. He was choosing power over destiny, politics over love. He was not the man she had believed him to be. She opened her eyes. The tears that gathered did not fall. Instead, a profound, unsettling calm settled over her. The pack's anxious whispers died down, sensing a shift. Kyle expected tears. He expected her to fall to her knees, to question the goddess, to make a scene that would justify his choice in the eyes of the pack. See, in Omega's weakness. He was prepared for her pain. He was not prepared for her acceptance. Luna took a deep, steadying breath, the air cooling the fire in her lungs. When she spoke, her voice did not tremble. It was clear, quiet, and carried on the still night air to every wolf present. I hear your rejection, Alpha Kyle. The title was deliberate, a wall erected between them, and I accept it. Silence. It was not the quiet of anticipation, but a deep, ringing, absolute silence. The very forest seemed to hold its breath. No one moved, no one whispered, even the wind died. To accept a rejection so swiftly, so peacefully, it was unheard of. It bypassed drama and went straight to a verdict. In her acceptance, she was not the victim, she was the judge, and her sentence was her quiet dignity. Kyle blinked, his cold composure cracking for a microsecond. Confusion flickered in his alpha gray eyes. You accept? I do, Luna said, her gaze steady on his. She did not look at Selene's smug smile. The mate bond was a gift. You have chosen to return that gift unopened. That is your right and your loss. I will not cling to someone who sees my heart as a liability. She took a step back, a formal, final motion. The golden thread inside her not just snapped, it dissolved, leaving behind a strange, numb emptiness. The mate sickness would come, she knew, but in this moment she felt something else, a terrifying, unshackled freedom. The pack needs its alpha strong and united. I will not be the cause of discord. My role as an Omega is to serve and heal. That I will continue to do, for the good of Silverfang. But from this moon forward, I release Alpha Kael from any claim or expectation of mine. She turned, her simple linen dress whispering against the grass. The silence was a physical entity, pressing in from all sides. It was the sound of a pack's worldview tilting. It was the sound of an alpha's authority being challenged, not by a roar, but by a serene, devastating whisper. As she walked towards the edge of the clearing, head high, the silence finally broke, not with shouts, but with a low, uneasy ripple of awe and fear. Kael stood frozen, Celine's hand on his arm now feeling like a chain. He had wanted to be free of her, but he had expected to carry the weight of her pain, to be the strong one bearing the burden of her weakness. Instead, she had handed the weight back to him, neat and clean. He had rejected her, and she had accepted, and in doing so, she had left him standing in a vacuum of silence, the hollowness of his victory echoing louder than any scream. Luna disappeared into the tree line, the shadows embracing her. The pack remained, utterly silent, the celebration of their alpha's new choice utterly extinguished. The night felt colder, and Alpha Kael, for the first time since becoming leader, felt a tremor of something that was not power. It was the first faint chill of a loss he could not yet name. The days following the rejection unfolded in a stifling, unnatural quiet. The Silverfang pack moved through its routines, hunting patrols, training drills, border checks, but the usual vibrant hum of pack life was gone. It was as if a glass dome had been lowered over the territory, muffling sound and spirit. Conversations were hushed, laughter was rare and quickly stifled, and eyes were constantly darting, wary. The epicenter of this silence was Luna's small cottage near the healing den. She had returned there after the moonlit gathering and just continued. She tended her herb garden with meticulous care, sorted poultices and cleaned bandages. When a young warrior limped in with a twisted ankle, she treated him with the same gentle, efficient hands as always. But she spoke less. Her smiles, once warm and frequent, were now faint, ghostly things that didn't reach her eyes, which held the distant, haunted look of a receding tide. The pack didn't know how to treat her. They had expected a weeping, fading wraith, a living cautionary tale of the mate sickness. Instead, Luna moved among them like a calm, quiet storm. Her acceptance had disarmed their pity and twisted it into a form of awe and unease. She was a mirror reflecting their alpha's controversial choice back at them, and the reflection was uncomfortably clear. Kael, meanwhile, festered in his newfound freedom. His planned celebration with Celine had been a tense, joyless affair. The expected triumph of claiming a strong, suitable mate had soured. Celine, frustrated by the pack's mood, had become demanding. "They disrespect you by respecting her silence," she hissed one evening in his lodge. "You must command their joy, assert your dominance." But Kael found he couldn't. The silence was a foe he couldn't grapple. He could command obedience, but he couldn't command genuine warmth. Everywhere he went, the ghost of Luna's calm, "I accept," followed him. He started to notice things he'd taken for granted. The way the elders had always brightened when Luna brought them her special tassans, how the pups would cling to her skirts without fear, the respectful nods from warriors who valued her skill at patching them up. These small threads of pack unity, he realized with dawning irritation, had often run through her hands. Worst of all was the physical pull. The mate bond was severed, but his alpha senses were acutely, maddeningly aware of her. He could catch her scent, lavender and moonlight, on the wind, and his wolf would stir with a confusing mix of longing and fury. He'd see her across the clearing, head bowed over a basket of herbs, and a visceral, possessive urge would claw at him. She is mine. But she wasn't. He had thrown her away. The contradiction was a constant itch under his skin. One afternoon, the silence broke in a way no one expected. Beta Ronin, Kael's most loyal and blunt friend, finally spoke up during a strategy meeting. "The pack is fractured, Kael. Morale is lower than before the war with the Blackwood pack. This quiet is worse than outright rebellion." Kale growled, slamming a fist on the table. They will adjust, Kale growled, slamming a fist on the table. They will see the strength Selene brings. They see a beta's daughter where an alpha's chosen Luna should be, Ronan said quietly, risking his alpha's wrath. And they see the true Luna, the one the moon goddess chose for you, tending wounds and saying nothing. Her strength is humbling you, Kale. By not fighting, she's winning. Kale's roar of rage shook the walls. He banished Ronan from the meeting, but the beta's words festered. That afternoon, driven by a compulsion he couldn't name, Kale found himself at the edge of Luna's garden. She was on her knees, digging in the earth, her hands soiled. She didn't look up as he approached, though her shoulders tensed minutely. "You're poisoning the pack," he accused, his voice rough. Luna paused, sitting back on her heels. She looked up at him, and the emptiness in her gaze was a physical blow. There was no love there, no hate, not even pain, just absence, a vast, quiet space where he used to be. "I am doing my duty, Alpha, as I always have," her voice replied, a soft monotone. "Your duty is to fade away gracefully," he snapped, the words cruel even to his own ears. "This performance of stoicism, it's a rebellion." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It held no warmth. A rebellion? To quietly plant yarrow and comfrey? To bind wounds? You rejected me, Kale. You defined my presence as a weakness. I am merely living in the world you created. If that world is silent, the fault lies not with the echo, but with the voice that fell silent first. He staggered back as if struck. Her logic was an inescapable trap. She had taken his rejection and built a fortress of peace around it, and he was locked outside. "Do you feel nothing?" The question tore from him, raw and desperate. "The mate sickness should be taking you. You should be begging for mercy." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Profound exhaustion. "I feel the hollow," she whispered, looking at her dirty hands. "Where the bond was, there's just cold space. The sickness is not a dramatic fever, Kale. It is the slow freezing of that space. I accept that too. Now, please leave. Your presence disturbs the herbs." Dismissed. By an omega, in his own territory. Kale turned and left, a storm of fury and confusion warring within him. That night, he dreamed not of Selene, but of Luna's silent, accepting eyes. He woke with a snarl, the hollow in his own chest aching in sympathy with the bond he had severed. The pack's silence deepened. It was no longer just shock, it was a judgment, and Luna, in her quiet cottage, continued to hollow out day by day, her strength becoming a legend, a ghost story that haunted her alpha and held the entire pack in a breathless, waiting grip. They all sensed it. This wasn't the end. This silence was the pause before a cataclysm. They just didn't know from where it would come. A week after Kale's confrontation in the garden, a new tension crackled in the Silverfang air, overlaying the pervasive silence. It was the electric feel of a coming storm, carried on the scent of ozone and foreign power. Border patrols returned with reports of strange wolves, not encroaching, but observing. Their scent was ancient, wild, and carried an authority that made even Kale's beta's hackles rise. The official notification came at dawn. A lone rider atop a massive jet-black warhorse arrived at the main gate. He wore no colors, bore no standard, but the sheer, untamed dominance rolling off him had the sentinel wolves lowering their heads in involuntary submission. He delivered a single parchment sealed with wax the color of dried blood, imprinted with a symbol none recognized, a crown woven of thorn and moonlight. "For your alpha," the rider said, his voice like grinding stones, before turning and disappearing into the forest as swiftly as he came. The scroll found its way to Kale's trembling hands. Selene peered over his shoulder as he broke the seal. The message inside was succinct, written in a bold, slashing script. "The territories are in disorder. The threads of fate are torn. I come to see the source of the silence that echoes across the mountains. Expect my arrival at sundown. Valerius, Alpha King of the Northern Realms." The blood drained from Kale's face. The Alpha King, a myth, a distant power who hadn't personally visited a frontier pack in living memory. His purview was the great alliances, the wars between massive conglomerate packs, not a place like Silverfang, the source of the silence. The words seemed to burn the parchment. How could a king know of their internal strife? Panic, sharp and acrid, swept through the pack. The silent judgment of Luna was instantly eclipsed by the terror of a royal judgment. The lodge was frantically prepared, the best game hunted, stores of mead broached. Celine preened, seeing this as her moment to shine as the future Luna. Kale drilled his warriors on presentation, his mind racing. What had drawn the king's eye? A rejected mate was a private tragedy, not a royal concern. As the sun dipped below the trees, casting long, accusing shadows, the king arrived. He came not with a roaring entourage, but with a silent contingent of 12 warriors, the legendary Shadow Guard. They moved as one entity, their presence swallowing sound. And at their center was Valerius. He was not the largest wolf Kale had ever seen, but he was the most dominant. Power radiated from him in a visible, almost shimmering aura. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, streaked with silver at the temples, and his eyes were the color of a winter sky, pale, piercing, and utterly devoid of warmth. He wore simple, dark leathers, but the mantle draped over his shoulders was pure silver-white wolf fur, a symbol of undisputed sovereignty. Kale, with Celine at his side, met him at the lodge entrance, bowing deeply. Alpha King Valerius, Silverfang is honored. Valerius's gaze swept over Kale, then Celine, then the gathered trembling pack elders. It was a dismissive glance. The honor is yet to be determined, he said, his voice low but carrying to every ear. I have heard a whisper on the wind, a story of a rejection accepted, of a pack that has lost its voice. Show me your pack, Alpha Kale, all of it. The command was clear. This was not a social visit. It was an audit. The tour was a tense, humiliating affair. Valerius asked few questions but observed everything. The strained faces of the warriors, the averted eyes of the elders, the children who didn't laugh. He smelled the fear and the discord like rot on the wind. Celine's attempts to charm him with practiced speeches about pack strength were met with a silence so profound it made Kael's earlier silence seem noisy. Finally, as twilight deepened, they passed near the healing den. Luna was outside, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, her movements rhythmic, her focus absolute. She hadn't come to see the king. She was a world away in her hollow, quiet place. Valerius stopped. The entire procession halted behind him, his gaze locked onto Luna. "Who is that?" he asked, his tone deceptively mild. Kael's throat tightened. "That is Luna, an Omega, our healer." "An Omega," Valerius repeated. He took a few steps forward, his shadow guard parting seamlessly. Kael had no choice but to follow. Luna sensed the formidable presence and looked up. Her eyes, those vast pools of quiet emptiness, met the icy winter gaze of the Alpha King. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a flicker. In Luna's eyes, a spark of recognition, not of the man, but of the sheer, staggering weight of his power. In Valerius's eyes, the glacial ice seemed to fracture, revealing a flash of intense, searching curiosity. He stood before her, looking down at the mortar in her hands. "What are you making, healer?" "A poultice for deep tissue wounds, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice that same soft, calm monotone. She did not bow, she did not tremble. She simply stated a fact. "You are the one who was rejected?" he asked. "I am the one who was rejected," she corrected gently, a nuance that screamed volumes. "And I accepted." Valerius leaned in, ever so slightly, inhaling her scent, lavender and moonlight, and beneath it the chilling, unique scent of a severed mate bond, like ozone and ashes. His eyes narrowed. "You bear no sign of sickness." "The sickness is internal, Your Majesty, a hollowing. I choose to fill my time with service, not sorrow." A muscle ticked in Valerius's jaw. He straightened, turning his frigid gaze on Kael, who felt like a pup caught stealing. "You rejected this?" he asked, the disbelief in his voice a sharper weapon than any accusation. "She is an Omega," Kael defended weakly, Celine squeezing his arm for support. "I need a strong Luna for the pack." Valerius looked from Kael and Celine back to Luna, who had returned to her grinding, seemingly oblivious to the world-shattering attention upon her. The contrast was devastating, the vibrant, ambitious couple and the serene, hollowed healer in her simple dress. "Strength," the Alpha King murmured, the word a curse. "You have traded a diamond for a shard of glass, Alpha Kael, and blinded your entire pack in the process." He didn't wait for a response. He turned on his heel, his mantle swirling. "I will lodge here tonight. I wish to speak with the healer. Alone." The command dropped like a stone into the silent pond of the pack. Kael could only nod, humiliation and a new, more primal fear coursing through him. As Valerius was led to the prepared lodge, his final glance over his shoulder was not at the Alpha, but at Luna, still grinding her herbs in the gathering dark, an island of impossible peace in the chaos he had brought. The king had come for the silence, and he had found its source. Now the entire pack held its breath, waiting to see what the sovereign would do with her. The king's command hung over the pack like a suspended blade. Luna, summoned to the Alpha Lodge, now ceded to Valerius, felt none of the terror that gripped the others. The hollow inside her muted everything. Fear, hope, anticipation, they were all distant echoes in the vast, cold chamber where her bond to Kael used to burn. She simply washed the soil from her hands, smoothed her plain dress, and walked through the silent, staring crowd with the detachment of a sleepwalker. 2 members of the Shadow Guard stood like obsidian statues outside the lodge door. They opened it without a word, their impassive eyes tracking her as she passed inside. The main room was dim, lit only by the fire in the great hearth. Valerius stood before it, silhouetted against the flames, the silver fur of his mantle glowing. He had dismissed his guard. They were utterly alone. "Sit," he said, not turning around. His voice was less formal now, but no less commanding. Luna chose a simple wooden chair by the large oak table, folding her hands in her lap. She watched the firelight dance over the contours of his powerful back, the relaxed posture that still thrummed with lethal potential. "You do not fear me," he stated, finally turning to face her. His wintry eyes seemed to dissect her in the flickering light. "Should I, Your Majesty?" asked Luna, genuine curiosity in her tone. "You're the king. My fear or lack of it will not change your will. It seems a waste of energy." A faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his mouth, not a smile, an acknowledgement of an unexpected answer. "Your Alpha fears me, his intended fears me, your pack reeks of fear, yet you, the Omega healer with a shattered soul, smell of nothing but lavender and quiet resolve. Explain it." Luna considered. "When you have already lost the thing you thought defined you, there's very little left to fear losing. The hollow is peaceful in its own way. It cannot be hurt any further." Valerius paced slowly, a predator circling. "You speak of the mate sickness as a hollow. Others speak of agony, fever, madness. Perhaps for those who fight it. I accepted it. The pain was acute at the moment of severing. Now it is an absence, like a limb has been removed. There's phantom pain, but mostly space." He stopped in front of her, looking down. His dominance was a physical pressure in the room, but it seemed to flow around her, finding no purchase. "You accepted his rejection to deny him the spectacle of your pain. A clever, cold strategy." For the first time, a spark of something, not emotion but intellectual disagreement, flared in her eyes. "You misunderstand, King Valerius. It was not strategy. It was survival. To beg, to rage, to wither publicly, that would have been to give him the final piece of myself, my dignity. I chose to keep that. It was the only thing left that was truly mine. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire. Valerius's gaze was intense, probing. And your pack? They suffer in this silence you have created? They suffer in the truth, she corrected softly. My silence merely holds up a mirror to it. They see their alpha's choice for what it was. That discomfort is not mine to soothe. Not anymore. You are angry. No. She shook her head slowly. Anger is a fire. It requires fuel. My fuel was love, and it has been spent. There are only ashes now. Valerius turned back to the fire, his brow furrowed. He had come expecting a victim, a broken thing to either pity or use as an example. He had found instead a fortress of serene desolation, a strength so quiet it was deafening. It intrigued him. It bothered him. As king, he had seen every type of power, brute force, cunning, charisma. This was different. This was the power of absolute, unassailable acceptance. The mate bond is a sacred thread, he said, his voice a low rumble. To sever it recklessly weakens not just the wolves involved, but the spiritual fabric of the territory. Your alpha's selfishness has created a wound here. I can feel it. This silence is the sound of that wound. Luna said nothing. It was not her place to agree or disagree with a king's judgment. Why did he choose the other? Valerius asked abruptly. Selene comes from a strong bloodline. Her father is a wealthy beta from the southern packs. She is a skilled fighter. He believes she will make him and Silverfang more powerful. She recited the facts as if describing the properties of an herb. And you, what is your bloodline? A sad, ghostly smile. I am a foundling, left at the borders as a pup. The pack took me in. My strength is in healing, not fighting, in mending, not breaking. It was not enough. Valerius looked at her over his shoulder, his eyes gleaming. A foundling omega with the grace of a queen under fire and the strategic mind of a seasoned general. He traded a latent diamond for a polished pebble. He spat the words with contempt. It is not merely a rejection. It is a catastrophic failure of perception. Luna felt a faint stir in the hollow. Not pain, but confusion. Why was the Alpha King, a being of ultimate power, spending his time analyzing her rejected state? Your Majesty, with respect, why does my circumstance matter to the crown? There are wars, treaties. Because, he interrupted, turning fully to face her, his gaze burning with sudden fierce intensity. This circumstance, as you call it, is a toxin. A weak alpha making a blind, arrogant choice is one thing, but the repercussions, this psychic sickness in the land, this perversion of the natural order, threatens the stability of all the territories that border yours. A pack's heart is sick. I am the king. I am the surgeon. And you, he took a step closer, the air vibrating. You are both the symptom and the only potential antidote I see. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, caging her in. His scent, ancient pine, frost, and raw, untamed power enveloped her. It should have been overwhelming. It should have triggered submissive terror. In the hollow, it simply resonated, a deep foreign note in her emptiness. You interest me, Luna the Hollow. Your quiet is the loudest thing I have heard in a century. Your acceptance is a rebellion that has toppled an alpha without lifting a finger. You are an anomaly, and I do not tolerate anomalies in my realms without understanding them. He straightened, the moment breaking. You will accompany me when I leave. It was not a request, it was a decree. Luna's eyes widened, the first true crack in her calm. Accompany you? I am Silverfang's healer. My place is here. Your place, Valerius said, his voice returning to its imperial coldness, is where your king decides it is. Your presence here is a constant reminder of your alpha's failure, a splinter in the pack's soul that prevents healing. Removing you is the first step in cauterizing this wound, and I wish to study this hollow of yours. Prepare to leave at first light." He turned away, dismissal final. Luna sat in the chair, the king's order echoing in the quiet space inside her. The hollow, for the first time, felt not like an absence, but like a chamber waiting for a new, terrifying note to be struck. She had accepted an alpha's rejection. How did one accept the command of an alpha king? News of the king's decree spread through Silverfang like wildfire, shattering the silence with a cacophony of shock, outrage, and fearful speculation. The alpha king was taking their healer? It was an unprecedented humiliation for Kale, a blatant statement that the pack's affairs were so mismanaged they required royal intervention. Kale stormed into the lodge just before dawn, his control frayed to nothing. Valerius was breaking his fast on simple bread and cured meat, looking utterly unperturbed. "You cannot take her," Kale snarled, bypassing all protocol. "She is a member of my pack, my subject." Valerius took a slow sip of water, his pale eyes lifting to meet Kale's furious gaze. "She was a member of your pack. You made her a pariah when you rejected her. You made her a symbol when she accepted. Now she is a point of instability in my domain. I am removing her. This is not a negotiation, Alpha Kale. It is a royal order. Defy it, and Silverfang will be dissolved, its members scattered to the winds." The threat was delivered with such chilling matter-of-factness that Kale's rage turned to ice in his veins. He saw the truth in the king's eyes. He would do it. "What do you want with her?" Kale asked, his voice hoarse. "That," Valerius said, standing and brushing crumbs from his hands, "is no longer your concern. Your concern is ruling the pack you chose over her. A task, I observe, you are failing at miserably. Fix it. The stability of your borders is now under my direct scrutiny." With that, Kale was dismissed. He stood in the center of his own lodge, feeling it become foreign territory as Valerius strode outside, where his shadow guard and their horses were assembled. Luna emerged from her cottage. She carried only a small satchel, her mortar and pestle, a few precious herbs, a change of clothes. She had said no goodbyes. The pack had gathered, a silent, mournful audience. Their anger at Kale was now palpable, a thick fog of resentment. In taking Luna, the king was taking the last piece of their pack's heart, the innocent casualty of their alpha's pride. Celine watched from the steps of the pack house, a triumphant glint in her eyes. The rival was being removed, but the look on Kale's face, a mixture of devastation, fury, and loss, stripped any joy from the moment. Luna walked towards the waiting horses. She paused as she passed Kale. She didn't look at him, but her words, soft as a petal, fell between them. "You wanted me gone, Alpha. Now your wish is granted by a higher power. I hope the strength you chose was worth the price." It was the final, gentle twist of the knife. Kale could say nothing, his wolf howling in silent, agonized protest inside him. He wanted to be free of the bond, not of her. This was an amputation. Valerius watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. He gestured, and one of the shadow guard brought forward a sleek, dark mare. Luna approached the horse, hesitating. She was no rider.
"You will ride with me," Valerius declared, his tone brooking no argument. Before Luna could react, he had mounted his massive black stallion in one fluid motion and leaned down, offering her his arm. The action was shockingly intimate for a king. A collective gasp went through the pack. To share a mount with the Alpha King was an honor of immense significance, a statement of possession and protection more powerful than any words. Kyle felt his knees weaken, Celine's face contorted in jealous rage. Luna looked at the offered arm, then at the king's impassive face. The hollow within her echoed. She had no energy for pride or protest. She placed her small hand in his, and he pulled her up effortlessly, settling her in front of him in the saddle. She was enveloped in his scent, his heat, the solid wall of his chest at her back. It was not comforting, it was overwhelming, a new form of captivity. "We ride," Valerius announced. He didn't look back at Silverfang. As the horses moved off at a brisk trot, Luna forced herself not to look back either. She stared straight ahead at the path leading away from the only home she'd ever known. She didn't cry. The tears had frozen somewhere deep in the hollow. She simply sat, rigid, feeling the distance grow with each hoofbeat. They rode in silence for hours, the shadow guard a silent, efficient perimeter around them. The forest changed from Silverfang's familiar pines to older, denser woodlands, the air growing cooler. "You are trembling," Valerius observed, his voice a vibration against her back. "I am cold," she lied, her voice barely a whisper. One of his arms, which had been holding the reins, shifted, tightening around her waist, pulling her more firmly against him. His mantle wrapped around her, enveloping her in the scent of frost and power. "Then you will not be cold," he said, as if stating a simple law of nature. The gesture was possessive, practical, and disorientingly gentle. Luna's breath hitched. In the hollow, the frozen edges seemed to quiver. This was not the pain of rejection. This was the terrifying, unfamiliar pressure of a tension from a force of nature. She was a leaf caught in the hurricane, and the storm's eye was fixed solely on her. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked. "To my stronghold, the Obsidian Peak." "A king's fortress, a place of legend." "To study the hollow," she repeated his words dully. "To understand it," he corrected, his tone shifting, becoming more introspective. "And to understand why a wolf with the heart of a Luna, chosen by the moon goddess herself for an alpha, was thrown away for a pale imitation. Your former alpha's loss is—" He paused, and his next words were spoken so quietly only she could hear, a secret for the wind and her alone. "Potentially the most significant gain of my reign." Luna's heart, dormant for so long, gave a single hard thump against her ribs. Fear, real and alive, finally seeped through the cracks in her numbness. She was not just a specimen to be studied. She was a piece on a king's board, and she had no idea what game he was playing or what role he intended for her. The hollow was no longer a refuge. It was becoming a chamber, and the Alpha King was bringing with him a howling gale, threatening to fill it with something she couldn't yet name. Behind them, Silverfang dwindled into memory, cloaked in a deeper, more permanent silence. Ahead lay the unknown, the Obsidian Peak, and the terrifying, focused curiosity of the wolf who held the fate of kingdoms in his hands, and who now held her. The journey to the Obsidian Peak took 3 days. 3 days of riding pressed against the solid, unyielding strength of the Alpha King. 3 days of his silent, observing presence at her back. 3 days of the Shadow Guard's wordless efficiency. Luna spoke little, ate what was given to her, and slept a thin, haunted sleep under the vast, unfamiliar stars. The hollow inside her began to feel less like an empty space and more like a wound being exposed to a new, harsh climate. On the morning of the 4th day, they emerged from the tree line, and Luna's breath caught. The Obsidian Peak wasn't a metaphor. It was a colossal, jagged mountain of dark, glossy stone that speared the clouds. Wrapped around its lower slopes was a fortress city of staggering scale and imposing beauty. Walls of the same dark stone gleamed in the sun, and banners bearing the thorn and moonlight crest snapped in the high, cold wind. It was a place of raw, untamed power, a testament to the king who ruled from its heights. As they rode through the towering gates, the atmosphere changed. The silence here was not like Silverfang's stifled quiet. This was the silence of awe, of absolute order. Thousands of wolves, warriors, craftsmen, mothers, pups, stopped their activities as the king's party passed. They bowed deeply, but their eyes, full of reverence for Valerius, slid to Luna with unconcealed shock and curiosity. An unknown female riding before the king, wrapped in his mantle, was a message louder than any proclamation. They ascended winding pathways through the city to the inner citadel, a palace carved into the living rock of the peak itself. Inside, it was all soaring arches, firelit halls, and tapestries depicting epic battles and ancient lore. The air hummed with latent power. Valerius finally dismounted in a vast courtyard, lifting Luna down with the same effortless grace. Her legs, stiff from days of riding, nearly buckled. His hand on her elbow steadied her, a grip both firm and brief. "This is your home now," he stated, his winter gaze sweeping the surroundings. "You will have chambers. You will have whatever you require for your healing work. You will be treated with the respect due to a royal guest. But you are not free to leave." "A gilded cage," Luna murmured, looking up at the impassive stone faces of the citadel. "A sanctuary," he countered sharply, "or a crucible. That will depend largely on you." He gestured to a severe-looking she-wolf with graying hair and eyes as sharp as flint, who had approached and bowed deeply. "This is Althea, the seneschal of the peak. She will see to your needs. I have matters of state to attend." And with that, he was gone, his shadow guard melting away with him, leaving Luna alone and adrift in the heart of a mountain. Althea's assessment was swift and thorough. "Follow," was all she said. She led Luna through labyrinthine corridors to a set of rooms that took her breath away for a different reason. They were not opulent in a soft way, but beautiful in their severity. A main chamber with a fireplace, a window that looked out over a dizzying vista of mountains and clouds, a separate room for sleeping, and a small sunlit alcove perfect for an herb garden or workbench. There were shelves already stocked with basic medical supplies, empty pots, and fresh linen. "The king's orders were precise," Althea said, her voice devoid of warmth but not in kind. "You are to want for nothing material. Your time is your own, save for the king's summons. You may utilize the palace gardens and the great library. Do not attempt to leave the citadel walls unescorted." "Why?" Luna asked, the question escaping her. "Why all this for me?" Althea's flinty eyes met hers, and for a moment Luna saw a flicker of something, not pity, but a profound understanding. "The king is the balance of our world. He sensed a disturbance, a sickness in the weave of things. He has brought the source of that sickness and its potential cure to its heart. You are an equation he intends to solve, child. Whether you are a variable or the answer remains to be seen. Bow. Dinner will be brought. Rest." Left alone, Luna finally crumbled. The journey, the shock, the overwhelming scale of it all crashed down. She slid to the floor by the magnificent window, hugging her knees. The hollow ached with a new kind of loneliness, vast and echoing. She was a tiny, insignificant thing in a fortress of power. Days blurred into a strange routine. She tended a small herb garden in her alcove. She explored the library, its scrolls and tomes speaking of histories and magics far beyond Silverfang's woods. She was polite but distant to the servants. The palace inhabitants treated her with a cautious, bewildered respect, rumors about the hollow healer flying thick and fast. And then the summons would come. Not to a throne room, but to the king's private study, a room lined with maps and strange artifacts. He would ask questions, not about Kale or the rejection, but about her. What did she feel when she healed? What did she think of the old stories in the library about the moon goddess's tears? Did the hollow have a taste, a color, a sound? Their interactions were intense, intellectual dissections of her own emptiness. He was a brilliant, relentless interrogator, peeling back the layers of her numbness with surgical precision. Sometimes he would just watch her as she worked on a poultice for the palace healer, who had grudgingly accepted her skill, his gaze heavy and thoughtful. One evening, during such a session, he asked, "Do you blame the goddess for your pain?" Luna, grinding evening primrose seeds, didn't look up. "No, she gave a gift. It was the recipient who was flawed." "And do you feel nothing when you think of him now?" She stopped grinding. I feel the shape of the hollow, a kale-shaped space. The memory is there, but it's like a story about someone else. It has no heat. Valerius was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Come here." Wary, she approached his desk. He reached out, not touching her, but his hand hovered near her chest, over her heart. A faint silver glow emanated from his fingertips, the touch of an alpha king's power used to sense the spiritual fabric of things. Luna froze. She felt it, a probing, immense energy brushing against the edges of the hollow. It was invasive, terrifying, but not painful. It was like a searchlight in a dark cavern. His eyes closed in concentration, his brow furrowed. Suddenly, his eyes flew open, blazing with a storm of emotion she'd never seen in them. Shock, fury, and a dawning possessive awe. "By the goddess," he breathed, the power fading from his hand. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You are not just a hollow from a severed bond." "What is it?" Luna whispered, her hand instinctively covering her heart. "It is a vacuum," Valerius said, his voice hushed with revelation. A space cleared of a weak, unworthy connection. The bond didn't just break, it was purged to make room. He stood up abruptly, towering over her, his dominance filling the room in a crashing wave. The moon goddess didn't just gift you to a foolish alpha, she was preparing you. The silence wasn't your end, Luna. It was your gestation. He took her face in his hands, his touch not gentle, but fiercely intent. You are not broken. You are dormant, and something meant for a king was sleeping in a peasant's field. Luna stared into his winter fire eyes, the walls of her hollow trembling, the first cracks of something terrifying and new beginning to form. The king hadn't just found a curiosity, he believed he had found a destiny. And in that moment, Luna knew her life would never be her own again. The revelation in the study changed everything and nothing. Valerius treated Luna with a new, unsettling intensity. The intellectual curiosity was now fused with a sense of ownership. He still summoned her for conversations, but they were less interrogations and more pronouncements. He spoke of pack dynamics, of royal lineage, of the subtle energies that bound territories together. He was, she realized, educating her, as if preparing her for a role she hadn't auditioned for. The palace, attuned to the king's every shift in mood, followed suit. The cautious respect curdled into a sharper, more watchful deference. Luna was no longer just a strange guest. She was a project of the king's singular focus. Whispers followed her. She's a witch who ensnared him. She's a lost princess. She's the key to a prophecy. Luna felt like a seed under a heated glass. The hollow, which had been her numb sanctuary, now felt like a pressure chamber. Valerius's words, dormant, gestation, meant for a king, echoed incessantly. They ignited a low-grade panic. She didn't want to be meant for anyone. She just wanted the pain to stop. Her only solace was her work. She requested, and was granted, a small space in the royal infirmary. The head healer, an old, grizzled wolf named Bryn, was initially hostile, seeing her as an intruder, but Luna's skill was undeniable. Her hands, when healing, forgot their trembling. She had an intuitive sense for herbs and energies that went beyond Bryn's textbook knowledge. Slowly, a grudging professional respect developed. It was in the infirmary that she met Alara, a young warrior from the king's personal guard who had taken a poisoned blade to the shoulder. The wound was festering, resisting Bryn's strongest cures. Luna, studying the blackened veins, had a flash of intuition. "It's not just venom," she murmured. "There's a bitterness, a cursed intent in the metal. It needs to be drawn out, not just cleansed." Using a poultice of silverweed and moon-blessed water, a folk remedy from her Omega days, she treated the wound. Within hours, the blackening receded. Alara, feverish and in pain, gripped Luna's hand. "You have the touch of the true moon, healer," she slurred, her eyes glazed with gratitude. The comment from a loyal warrior of the Obsidian Peak sent another ripple through the court. Luna's reputation as the hollow healer began to acquire a new, more respectful prefix, the moon-touched healer. Valerius heard of it. That night he came to her chambers unsummoned for the first time. He stood in her doorway, a silhouette of contained power. "You are winning my wolves," he stated, not with displeasure, but with a sort of grim satisfaction. "I am healing them," I replied, not looking up, from the chamomile she was bundling. "It is who you are," he corrected, stepping inside. "A natural Luna. A true queen ignores no member of her pack, especially the wounded. Kale was a blind fool." He came closer, the air thickening. His rejection did not break your nature. It merely forced it into hibernation. Here, it is awakening. Luna looked at him, a spark of her old defiance flickering. "And what if I don't want it to awaken? What if I just want to be left alone to heal in peace?" A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure predatory displeasure. "There is no peace for one like you, not in a world of weak alphas and broken bonds. Your peace at Silverfang was a slow death. Here you have the chance for a true life, a life of purpose, of power." "Your purpose, your idea of power," she shot back, her voice rising.
"Yes," he thundered, closing the distance between them in one stride. His hands gripped her shoulders, not hurting, but implacable. "Because my purpose is the balance of this world, and your power, dormant or not, is a part of that balance. I will not let it wither in the shadows of self-pity." His words were a lash. The spark of defiance flared into anger, real, hot, living anger. It burst through the icy crust of the hollow, a searing, glorious sensation she hadn't felt in months. "I do not pity myself," she yelled, shoving against his immovable chest. "I survived. You drag me here, poke and prod at my soul, tell me what I am and what I'm meant for. You are no better than him. You just have a bigger territory." The moment the words left her mouth, the air froze. No one spoke to the Alpha King like that. Luna braced for fury, for punishment. It didn't come. Valerius stared at her, his winter eyes wide. Then, to her utter shock, a deep, genuine laugh burst from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, wilder. "There," he said, his grip loosening to a mere hold. "There she is, the storm beneath the silence. I knew it was in there." He released her, stepping back, his gaze burning with triumph. "You feel that? That fire? That is not the hollow. That is you, the you that was buried under the weight of an unworthy bond. Your acceptance wasn't weakness, Luna. It was a queen's first decree. I will not be diminished by your choice." Luna stood panting, the adrenaline of her anger mixing with confusion. His reaction was utterly disarming. "I am not a queen," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving her trembling. "Not yet," he said, his voice dropping to a predatory purr. "But every queen must first reclaim her own throne. You have reclaimed your spirit from the shadow of his rejection. The rest," he gave her a long, lingering look that promised conquest she couldn't fathom, "will follow." He left her then, standing amidst the scattered chamomile, her heart pounding a frantic, alive rhythm against her ribs. The hollow was still there, but it was no longer silent. It echoed with the aftershocks of her anger, the memory of his laugh, and the terrifying, thrilling prospect that he might be right, that in accepting the worst thing that could happen to her, she had unknowingly taken the first step towards becoming something she never dreamed possible. The storm was awake, and the Alpha King was standing at its eye, not to calm it, but to command its fury. While Luna navigated the terrifying awakening within the Obsidian Peak, Silverfang was unraveling. The king's departure with their healer hadn't restored order, it had legitimized the pack's silent rebellion. Luna was no longer just a wronged Omega, she was a prize deemed worthy of a king, making Kale's rejection seem not just cruel, but cosmically stupid. Morale was non-existent. Hunting parties returned with meager catches, patrols were lax.
The elders spoke openly of Kale's failing leadership. Selene, instead of uniting the pack, divided it further. Her attempts to act as Luna were met with cold indifference or thinly veiled contempt. She ordered, but no one listened with the willing hearts they had once offered Luna for a simple request. Kale was trapped in a nightmare of his own making. The mate bond was gone, but a new, more vicious ache had taken its place, a constant gnawing regret, amplified by the pack's disdain. He saw Luna everywhere, in the healing den now clumsily run by an apprentice, in the quiet corners where pups no longer played, in the empty space at mealtimes. Her final words, "I hope the strength you chose was worth the price," were a taunt on the wind. He began having violent, visceral dreams, not of Selene, but of Luna in the Obsidian Peak. He saw her not as a fading healer, but radiant, powerful, standing beside the imposing figure of Valerius. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart wolf holing a loss so profound it felt like a physical amputation. The breaking point came during a border skirmish with a rogue wolf pack. It was a minor threat, one Silverfang should have handled easily, but the warriors were distracted, their coordination off. Kale, fighting with reckless fury to vent his frustrations, overextended. A rogue's claw slashed deep across his flank, and he went down. His beta, Ronan, saved him, taking a nasty blow to the shoulder in the process. They drove the rogues off, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. The pack carried their wounded alpha and beta back to the village, the mood grim and fearful. The healer's apprentice fumbled with Kale's deep wound, causing him immense pain. As he lay feverish that night, the scent of infection already tainting the air, Selene stood over him, her face pinched with anger, not concern. "This is her fault," she hissed. "Her ghost is haunting this pack. You need to demand her back from the king. She's ours." "She was never ours," Kale groaned, the truth a bitter pill. "I made sure of that." Ronan, pale from blood loss and pain, was brought in on a cot next to him. The loyal beta looked at his alpha, his eyes full of pity. "He won't give her back, Kale, and we don't deserve her. We watched you break her, and we said nothing. This rot isn't just in our wounds, it's in the pack's soul." His words sealed the despair in the lodge. Kale closed his eyes, the pain of his body nothing compared to the agony in his spirit. He had wanted strength, and in his pursuit of it, he had hollowed out his pack's heart and his own. He was an alpha who couldn't lead, couldn't protect his own, and had lost the one gift the moon goddess had given him. 1,000 miles away, in the high infirmary of the Obsidian Peak, Luna jolted awake from a sound sleep. Her heart was hammering, a sharp, sympathetic pang lancing through the hollow in her chest. It wasn't her pain, it was an echo, a familiar, fading echo. She sat up, gasping, her hand pressed to her sternum. Images flashed behind her eyes, a bloody flank, Ronan's pained face, the glint of Selene's angry eyes. Kale. He was hurt, badly, and the pack was in crisis. The knowledge came to her not through a bond, but through the strange moon-touched sensitivity that had been growing since her arrival at the peak. The hollow, attuned to the broken thread of her past, had resonated with his severe distress. She didn't think. She threw on a robe and ran through the silent, torchlit corridors, not to the king's chambers, but to the rooms of Alara, the warrior she had healed. She knocked frantically. Alara, ever vigilant, opened the door instantly, hand on her dagger. Seeing Luna's wild eyes, she relaxed. "Healer, what's wrong?" "I need to see the king now. It's urgent." Alara, recognizing true distress, nodded. "Come." She led Luna to the king's private quarters, bypassing the guards with a look. Valerius was awake, studying maps by candlelight. He looked up, his gaze sharpening at the sight of Luna, disheveled and breathless. "Leave us," he told Alara. When they were alone, he stood. "Speak." "Silverfang," she gasped, the words tumbling out. "Kale is wounded, a deep infection. Ronan too. Their healer is inadequate. The pack, it's falling apart. I felt it. I knew it."
Valerius's expression didn't change, but a cold light entered his eyes. "And? You wish me to send my own healers to save the Alpha who cast you out?" "No." Luna said, then forced herself to calm. Yes, I mean, I need to go. A deadly quiet filled the room. Explain. It's not for him, she said, her voice firming with conviction. The vision, the pang, had clarified something. It's for the pack, the elders, the pups, the warriors who were kind to me. They are suffering for his mistake. They are my pack, even if he is not my alpha. I am their healer. My duty doesn't end because my location changed. She met his glacial stare. You said I have the heart of a Luna. A Luna does not abandon her people, even when they are led by a fool. Valerius studied her for a long, tense minute. He saw no lingering love for Kale, only a fierce, protective loyalty to the innocent. He saw the awakened strength in her, demanding to be used for its true purpose. It was precisely what he wanted to nurture, and it was infuriatingly directed back toward the source of her pain. If I let you go, he said slowly, you go under my banner, with my guard. You are not returning to him. You are a royal healer tending to a failing territory under my dominion. Is that clear? Luna nodded, relief and trepidation warring within her. Yes, your majesty. And you will return, he commanded, the words of vow. This is not a reprieve, Luna. This is a test of your strength, of your loyalty to your true calling. Do not fail it. Within an hour, Luna was riding out of the Obsidian Peak's gates at the head of a small elite contingent of the Shadow Guard, led by Alara. She carried a satchel of powerful medicines from Bryn's stores and the king's unspoken, heavy expectation. As they descended into the forests leading to Silverfang, Luna's mind was clear. She was not going back to the woman she was. She was going back as something new, a healer tempered by a king's regard, a wolf who had touched her own dormant storm. She was going to save her pack from the brink, not for Kale's sake, but for her own. And in doing so, she would finally lay the ghost of the rejected Omega to rest forever. The sight of the Shadow Guard emerging from the tree line sent a wave of panic through Silverfang. Sentinels howled the alarm, and the panic scrambled, fearing a royal attack. The panic turned to stunned disbelief when they saw who rode at the column's head. Luna. She sat straight on her horse, no longer the broken Omega in a simple dress, but a figure of quiet authority. She wore sturdy, travel-worn clothes of fine make, a dark cloak around her shoulders. The formidable Alara rode at her side, a living testament to the power she now represented. They rode straight to the Alpha's lodge. The pack gathered, a silent, awe-stricken sea of faces. Celine burst from the doors, her face a mask of outrage. You! How dare you return? You have no place here! Luna dismounted, ignoring her completely. Her gaze swept the crowd, finding familiar eyes. Elders, mothers, warriors she'd patched up. They saw their hope, their shame, their confusion. I am here as a healer of the Obsidian Peak, under the authority of Alpha King Valerius. I have come to tend to the wounded. She strode past a sputtering Celine and into the lodge. The smell of infection and despair was thick. Kale lay on a pallet, delirious with fever, his flank a swollen, angry red. Ronan was beside him, pale and weak. Kale's eyes, glazed with pain, focused on her as she entered. For a moment, disbelief, then a pathetic, desperate hope washed over his features. Luna? Be silent, Alpha, she said, her tone clinical, devoid of any warmth or resentment. She was a surgeon assessing a problem. She knelt, her expert hands probing the wound. She called for boiled water, clean linen, and her satchel. For the next several hours, Luna worked with focused intensity. She cleaned the festering wound, applied potent poultices from the Peak stores, and administered a fever-reducing tonic. Then she turned to Ronan, treating his wound with the same efficient care. The pack watched from the doorway, mesmerized. This was their Luna, but amplified, unshakable, moving with a confidence they'd never seen. As she worked on Ronan, Kale, his fever slightly abated, watched her as she worked.
The hollow ache in his chest yawned open wide. She was more beautiful than he remembered, but it was a beauty that had been forged in a fire he hadn't been able to light. She was untouchable. The humble Omega he'd rejected was gone, replaced by this poised, powerful woman who bore the invisible mark of a king's regard. When she was done, she stood, washing her hands in a basin. The infection is checked. They will both live with rest and proper care. She addressed the pack elders in the room. The poultice must be changed every 6 hours, the tonics administered at dawn and dusk. I will leave instructions. Celine, who had been fuming in the corner, finally snapped. You think you can just waltz back in and give orders? You are nothing, a cast-off, the king's charity case. Luna turned to her. The silence in the room was absolute. Luna's gaze was not angry, but pitying, which was far worse. I am the one who saved your alpha's life, Celine. What have you done for him, besides stoke his pride until it nearly killed him and this pack? Celine recoiled as if slapped. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Luna walked to the door, addressing the pack. The king sees your strife. Your alpha's recovery is the first step. Use it to remember who you are. Silverfang was once a pack of honor, not just strength. Find that again. Her eyes found Kale's, holding his fever-weakened gaze. A true alpha leads with his heart as well as his fist. You lost yours. I suggest you find it before the king decides this pack needs new leadership. The threat was implicit, and everyone felt its weight. She wasn't just giving medical advice, she was delivering a royal ultimatum. She spent the night in her old cottage, now feeling like a museum of a past life. The shadow guard camped outside, a stark reminder of her new reality. She didn't sleep. She walked the familiar paths under the moon, feeling the pack's energy, still wounded, but now threaded with a fragile new hope. Her doing. At dawn, as she prepared to leave, Kale emerged from the lodge, leaning heavily on Ronan. He was weak, but lucid. The pack gathered to see her off. Kale, he called, his voice rough. She turned, waiting. He took a few painful steps forward, his alpha pride crumbling under the weight of regret and physical agony. I was wrong, he said, the words torn from him, audible to all. About everything. About strength, about you. I am sorry. The pack held its breath. This was the apology they had all been waiting for. Luna looked at him, and for a moment the ghost of the love she'd felt flickered, not as a living thing, but as a memory. It caused no pain. It just was. I know, she said simply. I accepted that too. Her acceptance of his apology was as quiet and devastating as her acceptance of his rejection. It offered no absolution, no path back. It was merely an acknowledgement of a fact. It closed the book. She mounted her horse. Heal your pack, Kale. That is your penance, and your only hope. She nodded to Alara, and the shadow guard moved out. As they rode away, Luna did not look back. She had come. She had healed, she had spoken her truth. The chapter of Silverfang, of the rejected Omega Luna, was finally, definitively closed. Behind her, Kale sank to his knees, not from his wound, but from the finality in her eyes. He had gotten his apology out, but it had changed nothing. She was gone, forever. And in her wake she left not the silence of absence, but the ringing silence of a lesson learned too late. The pack looked from their broken alpha to the disappearing riders, knowing they had witnessed the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. Their true Luna had come back just long enough to show them what they had lost and to teach them how to save themselves. The return to the Obsidian Peak was a somber, introspective journey. Luna felt drained, not from the healing, but from the emotional archaeology of revisiting her grave. Yet, beneath the fatigue, there was a solid core of certainty. She had faced the ghost of her past and had not flinched. She had acted not as a victim, but as a sovereign of her own skills and morals. The hollow felt different, not empty, but cleared. a foundation swept clean. Valerius was waiting in the courtyard when they arrived. He dismissed the shadow guard with a nod, his eyes fixed on Luna as she dismounted. He didn't ask about Silverfang. He simply looked at her, reading the story in the set of her shoulders, the clarity in her eyes. "Come," he said, turning and leading her not to his study, but to a part of the citadel she had never seen, a secluded walled garden atop the peak, open to the sky. The view was breathtaking, the world spread out below them like a tapestry. Up here, only the wind and the stars could hear. "Well?" he finally asked, leaning against the stone parapet. "I reported he will likely survive," she stated, her voice steady. "I told him to heal them, that it was his penance." "And your heart?" The question was blunt, his gaze piercing. Did seeing him break it anew? Luna walked to the edge, looking out at the endless mountains. No, it was like looking at a stranger who had once been important. The connection is gone. The hollow, it's just a space now, not a wound. She turned to face him. "You knew, didn't you, that sending me back would do this, that it would sever the last lingering thread, not to him, but to the person I was there." A faint, approving smile touched his lips. A good king understands the hearts of his subjects, even, perhaps, especially the rare ones. You needed to go back as what you have become, to fully become it. You needed to see that you have outgrown that soil. "And what have I become in your eyes?" she asked, a challenge in her tone. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her, stopping an arm's length away. The wind whipped his dark hair. "A puzzle I am close to solving, a dormant power I have awakened, a queen in embryo." He reached out, not touching her, but his hand hovered near her face. The connection was electric, jolting through the cleared space inside her, filling it with a shocking, vibrant heat. "Mine," he murmured, his winter eyes burning. "You are the calm in the storm, the acceptance that defies rage, the healer who heals the very spirit of a territory. You accepted a rejection that should have killed you and turned it into a strength that called a king across mountains. You are the most fascinating, dangerous, and necessary thing to enter my world in 100 years. He closed the distance, his voice dropping to a low, visceral rasp. "Kale's rejection was the best thing that ever happened to you. It made you available for a crown." "A crown? You speak in madness." "Do I?" He finally touched her then, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The contact was electric, jolting through the cleared space inside her, filling it with a shocking, vibrant heat. "The mate bond is sacred, but not all bonds are equal. What the goddess intends for an alpha, she intends for a king 1,000-fold. The silence that fell on Silverfang when you accepted, it wasn't just shock. It was the world holding its breath, waiting for the true bond to snap into place, the one strong enough to handle the power like yours." His words were rewriting her history, her pain, her very identity. They were terrifying and intoxicating. "You think we are mates?" The question was a mere breath. "I know we are," he growled, his certainty in his voice absolute. "My wolf has known since the moment I saw you grinding herbs in that garden, surrounded by fools. It didn't roar, it went still, a hunter recognizing its equal. The bond hasn't snapped because you are still protecting that hollow, still living in the old silence, but it's there, a pressure, a potential, waiting for you to accept it." He cupped her face, his thumb stroked her jaw. "This is my gambit, Luna. I brought you here not just to solve an equation, but to claim its answer. I have shown you your strength. I have given you a purpose larger than one pack. I have stood back and watched you blossom. Now, I am done waiting." His head dipped, his lips a hair's breadth from hers. "Accept me. Not as a subject accepts a king, but as a queen accepts her king.
Fill that hollow not with silence or memory, but with a dynasty, with me. Luna was drowning in his presence, in the audacity of his claim. Every cell in her body was alight, resonating with the truth of his words. The hollow wasn't aching, it was singing, a silent, eager vibration tuned to his frequency. He was offering not just love, but a partnership of immense power, a chance to heal not just woes, but kingdoms, to use the strength born in her deepest pain for a purpose that terrified and thrilled her. She had accepted an alpha's rejection. Could she accept a king's claim? It wasn't a surrender, it was a coronation. She looked up into his eyes, seeing not just possession, but a fierce, unwavering respect. He saw her, all of her, and he wanted her not despite her strength, but because of it. Slowly, she raised her hand, placing it over his where it held her face. The connection solidified, a circuit completing. The silent, waiting pressure between them suddenly crystallized into a palpable golden force. It didn't snap, it bloomed. A wave of pure, incandescent power flooded the hollow, filling it with every corner, with light and heat, and a sense of rightness so profound it stole her breath. It was a bond, but unlike anything she'd felt with Kale. That had been a gentle thread. This was a chain of adamant, a nexus of shared power, a roaring symphony where there had been silence. A low, triumphant growl vibrated in Valerius's chest. His eyes blazed with silver fire, the king's power meeting and merging with the newly awakened force within her. Mine, he breathed against her lips, the word of vow and a claim.
And Luna, the rejected Omega, the hollow healer, the dormant storm, finally let go of the silence. She leaned into his touch, her own power rising to meet his in a cascade of moonlight energy visible in the air around them. Yours, she whispered back, the word not of submission, but of mutual conquest, and you are mine. High on the obsidian peak, under the watchful stars, the silence that had begun in a small clearing in Silverfang was shattered forever, not by a scream, but by the thunderous, joyful roar of a bond meant for kings and queens. The Alpha King had lost control of his heart, and in doing so, he had gained everything. The bond that bloomed on the parapet was not a quiet thing. It was a seismic event within the spiritual fabric of the obsidian peak. A wave of pure, resonant energy pulsed outwards, shaking no stones but trembling through the souls of every wolf in the citadel. Warriors on duty felt a surge of invigorating strength. Pups sleeping in the nursery settled into a deeper, more peaceful rest. The ancient stones themselves seemed to hum with a new aligned frequency. Valerius and Luna stood locked in that first world-shattering kiss, the physical manifestation of a connection that was rewriting their destinies. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their eyes glowing with a shared, otherworldly light, his like winter sun on ice, hers like molten silver. He rested his forehead against hers, a gesture of stunning intimacy from the untouchable king. "Feel it?" he rasped, his voice thick with awe and possession. Luna could only nod, overwhelmed. The hollow was gone. In its place was a vibrant, singing nexus of power, intricately woven with the immense, disciplined force that was Valerius. She could feel his emotions as clear echoes, fierce pride, a terrifying protectiveness, and a deep, saturating satisfaction. She could also feel the vast weight of his responsibilities, the intricate web of concerns for his realm now shared with her. It was not a burden, but a purpose, her purpose. Word spread through the peak before dawn, not through announcements, but through the pack sense, the collective intuition of wolves connected to a strong alpha pair. Their king had found his queen, and it was the moon-touched healer. The revelation was met not with political calculation, but with a profound, instinctive rightness. The wolves had felt her quiet power, seen her compassion, and now they felt the glorious truth of the bond. A celebratory howl, started by the shadow guard on the walls, rose and swelled through the mountain fortress, a song of welcome and fealty. The following days were a whirlwind. Luna was gently but firmly installed in the royal chambers adjacent to Valerius's. Althea, the seneschal, oversaw the preparation of a new wardrobe, garments that were both regal and practical, in shades of moon silver, deep blue, and forest green. They spoke of her station without erasing her identity as a healer. Valerius no longer summoned her to his study. She was simply there, by his side, as he ruled. He consulted her on matters beyond healing, disputes between pack leaders, trade agreements, the welfare of distant territories. Her insights, born of an Omega's empathy and sharpened by her unique journey, were startlingly astute. She saw the human cost of decisions, the subtle fractures that could lead to bigger breaks. Valerius listened. His respect for her mind grew with each passing hour. The official coronation was not a large, human-style ceremony, but a sacred ritual under the moon. On the highest terrace of the Obsidian, before the assembled alphas of the allied packs and the entire citadel, Luna stood beside Valerius. She wore a simple silver diadem woven with living moonflowers. The High Elder, an ancient wolf with eyes like milky quartz, addressed the moon goddess, speaking of destinies fulfilled and balances restored. Then Valerius spoke, his voice carrying to the farthest listener. "I present to you Luna, my fated queen, my equal, the heart of the Obsidian Peak and the healer of the realms. The silence ends tonight." He turned to her, and in front of all, he sank to one knee. It was a gesture that shook the assembled alphas to their core, the Alpha King kneeling. He took her hand. "Do you accept this pack? Do you accept this crown? Do you accept me, not as your subject, but as your mate and your partner in all things?" Tears, the first she had shed since the rejection, but these were of joy and overwhelming belonging, filled Luna's eyes. She looked at the sea of faces, seeing not judgment, but hope and acceptance. She looked at the mighty king on his knee before her, his fierce love laid bare. She felt the bond between them, a living, breathing entity of shared power and purpose. "I do," she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing in the mountain air. A roar of approval shook the very peak. As Valerius arose and pulled her into his arms, the bond between them flared visibly, a cascade of silver and gold light that arced into the night sky, a beacon seen for miles. The celebration that followed was legendary, but for Luna and Valerius, the true meaning was in the quiet moments after. In their shared chambers, surrounded by the echoes of the howls, he held her close. "It is done," he murmured into her hair. "It is begun," she corrected softly, looking out at their kingdom, now theirs in truth. The rejected Omega was no more. In her place stood Luna, the queen. The silence that once was her prison was now the foundation of her legend, the quiet before the dawn of a new era. Years flowed like a swift river from the peaks of the Obsidian Mountain. Luna, queen of the northern realms, was a figure of both reverence and beloved familiarity. She never lost her touch. Her royal chambers always had a corner for her herbs, and she still regularly visited the great infirmary, though now she advised more than she ground poultices. Her true healing, however, was on a grander scale. She traveled with Valerius, her presence a calming, unifying force. Disputes between packs often settled more easily when the serene, moon-touched queen listened with her wise, compassionate eyes. The bond between them only deepened, a formidable, beautiful thing that was the bedrock of the realm's stability. They ruled as true partners, his strategic might and unwavering authority perfectly balanced by her intuitive empathy and unifying grace. Where Valerius was the unbreakable sword, Luna was the unbreakable shield, and together they were an unstoppable force for a new kind of peace. One autumn, news came from the southern borders. Silverfang, under Alpha Kale, had successfully defended a valuable mining territory from an aggressive rival pack. It was a significant victory, demonstrating restored strength and cohesion. Valerius, reviewing the report, glanced at Luna, who was tending to a pot of sage on their balcony. "He has learned," he stated, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "The hard way."
Luna looked up, her eyes clear and peaceful. The mention of Kale no longer caused even a ripple in the deep, placid lake of her spirit. He had good people to save him from himself. Ronan makes an excellent beta. "Will you see him?" Valerius asked, the question casual, but his gaze was sharp. The bond thrummed with his possessive love, but also his absolute trust. "If you think it wise for royal relations," she replied, smiling slightly. "It is just a pack now, Valerius, one of many in our care." And so, when the royal progress brought them near the Silverfang borders, a meeting was arranged. It was held in a neutral clearing, a diplomatic formality. Valerius and Luna arrived with a modest, dignified guard. Silverfang's contingent was led by Kale and Ronan. Time had changed Kale. The arrogant, restless youth was gone, replaced by a weathered, solemn alpha. His eyes held the weight of hard lessons. When he saw Luna, he did not flinch, but his breath caught. She was breathtaking, not just in her beauty, which had matured into a regal elegance, but in the aura of absolute quiet power that surrounded her. She was clad in riding leathers and a cloak of deep blue, the small silver diadem in her hair. She stood beside the formidable Alpha King as his obvious equal, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The contrast to Celine, who stood a few paces behind Kale, looking pinched and unhappy, was painfully stark. Celine had gotten the title of Luna, but not the heart of the pack. It was Ronan who received the warmest nods from the Silverfang warriors. Protocols were observed. Kale reported on pack matters to his king and queen. His voice was respectful, his manner subdued. Luna asked gentle, insightful questions about crop yields and the health of the elders, questions that showed she remembered, that she still cared about the people, if not the man. As the formalities concluded, Luna's eyes met Kale's. She gave a slight, gracious nod. "Silverfang looks strong and well led, Alpha Kale. You have served your pack faithfully. The crown is pleased." Her words were a royal benediction, the final seal on his redemption arc. They held no warmth for him personally, but immense respect for his recovered duty. It was everything he could have hoped for, and less than he once dreamed of. It was perfect justice. Kale bowed deeply, his voice thick. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Your approval means a great deal." On the ride back to the Obsidian Peak camp, Valerius was silent for a long time. Then he said, "He still loves the ghost of what he lost." Luna leaned her head against his shoulder, the bond humming with her contentment. "He loves the idea of what he threw away, not me. The woman he knew could never have been your queen. She needed to be broken apart by his rejection, so the real me could be forged." Valerius brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "My fierce, wise queen." That night, under a canopy of stars, Luna stood at the edge of their camp, looking south toward the forests that had once been her whole world. She felt no pull, no nostalgia, only a quiet gratitude for the journey. The silence that had once been a prison of pain was now a cherished memory, the fertile, dark soil from which her life had explosively bloomed. She felt Valerius come up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, pulling her back against his solid strength. His chin rested on her head. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "I'm thinking about the silence, how it terrified everyone, how it was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I thought it would be the end of me. And now?" She turned in his arms, looking up at his beloved, fierce face etched in moonlight. "Now I understand. It was never an ending. It was the world holding its breath." She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. "Waiting for you, waiting for us. The silence wasn't my enemy, Valerius. It was the overture." He captured her hand, kissing her palm, his eyes glowing with a love as deep and eternal as the mountains around them. The bond between them flared, a gentle golden warmth in the cool night. Far away in Silverfang, Cale stood on his own porch, looking at the same moon. The pack behind him was alive with the sounds of a modest victory celebration. But for him, a quiet peace had finally settled, born of acceptance. He had heard the echo of the Queen's words, seen the unshakable truth of her happiness. The silence that had once begun with her acceptance of his rejection now found its final peaceful echo in his acceptance of the consequences. He had lost her, but in losing her, she had become the queen who now protected his pack as part of her realm. It was a strange, painful, and ultimately fitting closure. And high in the Obsidian Peak, and in all the territories under its watch, the legend was told of the Omega who accepted a rejection with such grace that it shook the world, silenced a pack, and called a king, of the hollow healer who became a queen. It was a story that taught of true strength, of destiny, and of the profound truth that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is not to fight the end, but to silently, bravely accept the beginning of something unimaginably greater. The silence had spoken, and its message was a love story for the ages. The end.